All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Writer's Block podcast. I am so honored to have Tim Challies here today with us. Tim is, if you don't know already, is a pastor and author, and he's one of the most trusted voices in the Christian blogging world. He's been blogging daily for over 2 decades. It's just a remarkable feat. We're going to talk to him about that here shortly. He's also written several books, including Do More Better, Visual Theology, and Seasons of Sorrow, which reflects his deep grief and God's comfort in a great loss in his life. He is the elder at Grace Fellowship Church in Toronto, and a lot of his writings, I'm sure, flows out of the work that he does there. And we're probably all most familiar with Tim and his daily a la carte emails that go out every week that include part of his own writing, and then he curates other writers around the world and shares their writing with his platform. So all that to say, thank you, Tim. We're so delighted that you're here to join us today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Well, like I've said, we've all are probably on this call. I know everyone here is familiar with your work and who you are. But for those who might listen to this podcast later, is there anything I missed in that intro and anything you'd like to tell us about your life and your work in ministry?
Um, yeah, I mean, I'd rather talk about just about anything than other than myself, but yeah, I don't know what you missed. Um, I'm learning to be a grandfather. That's kind of a big thing in my life right now. Abby had a baby, little Finnegan, about 7 months ago, so that's been a really precious thing.
Congratulations.
A whole new phase of life that's been a real joy. Thankfully, they moved to this area from Louisville, not long before Finn was born, so it's been a special joy to get to know them as a couple and get to know Finn as a grandson. So it's been a sweet thing. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else to say.
That's okay. Well, we covered all the bases. So we
You
really
got it.
want to talk to you about your writing specifically, and your daily blogging at challies.com. Tell us a little bit, like when you set out to start writing consistently, did you have any idea that you would take to it so much, you'd stick to it for over 20 years and see it grow the way it's grown?
No, I certainly didn't. I've never been good, or at least when I was younger, I wasn't good at sticking to things. And so I started lots of things in life, and few of them really lasted for very long. But blogging was one that stuck, and I'm thankful for that. But when I set out to do it, it was more a technological experiment than anything. I was in web design, I was in computers, and I saw this new technology and thought it would be fun to explore it. And so sort of jumped into it that way. Meanwhile, my family had just moved, so I was trying to keep up with them from a distance. Um, no social media yet in those days, so you kind of had to create your own little presence on the web, and so that's what I was doing. I wasn't setting out to create anything that would be lasting or anything that would be bigger than just a little family site. But through various circumstances and things I wrote about and the work of search engines and everything else, people came to read it, and it kind of grew into its own little thing. So I'm thankful. And I was just at a writers conference last week in Chicago, and you want to talk about, or they wanted me to talk about how I became a writer, but I'm not sure how much of my experience is really replicable today. It was a unique time when blogs were growing up. Publishing was in this transition phase where they're starting to look to blogs as kind of their minor leagues, and see who could gain an audience there and then offer them a book contract. And um, yeah, I just don't know how much is replicable and how much it was just a very unique time and unique set of circumstances then and there.
Yeah, yeah, I think you entered at a very infant stage of the whole blogging world, but you've also stuck with it and seen it go from being an infant to probably an adult. Um, do you ever, I mean, now that you've started this thing and it's become such an ingrained part of your day and your life, is it ever something that you kind of wish you could step away from, or is it still something that's very life-giving to you? I'm sure with it comes an element of a burden to keep it up. But is it something that you still really enjoy?
Yeah, you know, I think if I could, I would write books for a living, and that would reduce the pace a little bit. But there's
Mm,
not many Christian authors, not many authors at all, who can make a living off writing books. Just a very small fraction of a very small percent can actually do that. So most of us need something else. And so I still do mostly love blogging. I enjoy the day-to-day grind of it, but sometimes it does feel nice to not have so many deadlines. 7 deadlines a week is a lot.
yes.
Through four of them, three of them, I write an article, and that's a harder deadline than just creating a la carte as I do some days. But yeah, it's hard, and I sometimes wonder if there'd be a spot for me somewhere in publishing in a different thing, helping curate books through a process or something. But in the end, this seems to be how the Lord has gifted me and given me the opportunity. So I think as long as it exists, I intend to press on in it and just kind of see where it goes. Um, I'm thankful for the opportunity. I know many have tried, and not many have been able to do what I do. So I'm really thankful for that.
Yeah. And a platform like the one that you built it creates new opportunities for other projects. I know that the the level of engagement that you have is kind of unique in that you're doing it every single day. But I know like you've also been quite accomplished in writing a lot of books. So how what does that look like? Like how do you make that balance between like your daily deadlines and, bigger projects that you're working on?
Yeah, I've had the unique experience. Again, I think not all that I have done is replicable. I've had the unique experience of having publishers reach out to me more than I've ever needed to reach out to publishers. So again, that was just sort of part of the context of where I was getting started in the blogs when publishers were just starting to look to that and say, well, if there's someone there who can gain an audience, let's get that person to write a book. And so publishers, agents have all reached out to me and been eager to work with me, which has been huge. Not every publisher, there's some that are interested in people who are more of an audience than I do, but just generally, I haven't had to work hard in order to get book contracts or to get publishers interested in my material, and I'm really thankful for that. In terms of the ebb and flow of it, yeah, I want the blog to take the leading role in these things. I want it to be the main thing, and then books have to fit around it.
Mm,
There's some of the books I've written have really come out of the blog. So I've written a series of blog articles or something like Do More Better or my book Devoted. Those are blog series first, and then I could take that information and turn it into a book. Others I've had to just very much sort of work on the blog for a week, get some stuff queued up, and then take the next week to work on a book. And so I've got a book I've been procrastinating for a very long time now. I'm almost at the point where I'm done procrastinating, I think. And I'm going to have to do that one over the next few months. And I think that's how it'll have to be. Focus on the blog for a bit, get a good pool of information or articles built up, and then turn my attention to the book.
So do you work ahead or are you kind of in the daily rhythm? I mean, do you have a queue of posts lined up so that that frees you to write on your books?
At my best, I do, at least for articles. The a la carte basically has to be done every day. A couple times a year, I'll queue up a week's worth of those and then just disappear for a week and have my assistant actually put them out on social media each day. But other than that, those are being done every day. Um, the articles, yeah, I try to queue some up, but that requires a certain amount of productivity or a certain level of creativity to be able to create 3 or 4 articles and get them in my writing app. And often it just doesn't work that way. That's especially true when I'm preaching or speaking at conferences and I've got this other material I need to create. So creativity is not a limitless resource. I have a certain amount of it I can deploy between books, sermons, conference talks, blog articles, etc. So I just have to be careful how I allocate it and make sure I'm giving it to the right things. And again, the blog always has to be it has to be the main thing in my mind.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you saying that, but it is creativity is a limited resource for all of us, and I'm sure you feel it more acutely than most, and that like you have to constantly be producing and creating new material. So, how do you do that? What does that process look like for you? And are you like I would imagine you're reading a lot and you're getting a lot of intake in order to give the output that you are doing.
Mhm. Yeah, I set up so years ago I was failing at blogging. I think I was not doing very well at it, which is why I said I'm going to do it every day for a year. That will keep me honest, give me something to work toward, and that would be the accountability that would keep me from procrastinating or putting off, writing articles when I should be writing them. And so I did that for an entire year, and that's sort of what got the momentum going. And then I just re-upped that for the next couple of years until it just became a habit. So I haven't thought about it for a long time, but it's now just the daily grind. Pushing myself like that just put me into a sort of constant state of panic where I just have to keep coming up with content. And the only way to do that, as you said, is to keep the input high to make sure I continue to encounter good ideas. I live most of my reading is in the 1800s. That's my sweet spot, and that's where I think there are some really special writers, Christian writers that I absolutely love. So I spend most of my time reading old sermons or old books from the late 1800s, early 1900s. And then, yeah, just I don't want to say plagiarizing their ideas, but freshening them up or learning from them or imitating them. Paying tribute to them, whatever it is. And I just love the way they wrote, and I'm trying to recapture some of that now as well. So I'll write about contemporary things as well. But in terms of the input, most of that is from years gone by. I do read some contemporary books, but mostly to review them, not so much for the sake of my own soul.
Hmm.
I resonate much more with the older books.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite old guys? Who do you go
Yeah.
to?
J.R. Miller is my favorite, the one who's
Okay.
maybe marked me more than any other. Theodore Cuyler has been a huge source of inspiration. DeWitt Talmage, these are all American Presbyterians from the late 1800s. DeWitt Talmage, most of the way through a collection of 500 of his best sermons. And yeah, I just love it. And what I do is as I read them, I carefully capture their best quotes or ideas, and I feed those into a system I've really carefully built. And that system will send me some of those ideas, some of those quotes or illustrations. I get 5 of them every morning. And so I'm constantly refreshing what these people have said, keeping their ideas fresh in my mind. And that's been a huge thing for me as a writer.
Okay, well, my curiosity is piqued on your system. Are you can you share some of that with us? Is that a
Yeah.
replicable thing that you've done?
Yeah, very much so. So I sort of have 3 different systems. One of them is poetry. I love poetry, and I try to keep poetry in front of me at all times. At least once a day, I'm reading poems. Um, the other one is all those quotes being sent to my attention. The third one is all of this information contained in a system where I can go searching for it. So I can look for a keyword like marriage or something. And here's all these people have said about marriage, all the quotes I've captured, the illustrations I've captured. Um, I've written an article about the tools I use, and that would probably be easier to explain it than me actually describing it because it's a little bit technical at times.
Okay. Yeah.
I can send that to you. Maybe you can forward it on to
Yeah,
people.
I'd love to include that in the show
Mhm.
notes because I think that
Yeah.
writers are always um, trying to figure out a better way, to not reinvent the
Hmm.
wheel, but to get it rolling faster. And you've
Yeah.
clearly figured that out. So yeah, that would be
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. And this system works for me. And the benefit of it every morning when I wake up, there's 5 quotes or illustrations from these people I love and look up to and have been so meaningful to me. And there they are. And very often I can just take an idea from one of those and it just gets me off to the races.
Yeah, I love that. Well, so I'm curious. too. I have been the beneficiary of some of your a la carte shares, and that's been so encouraging and helpful in my own writing platform. So I love that you share your platform with other writers. Again, like the amount of material you must be seeing every day is I can't quite really put my mind around it because you have such a variety of topics that you share and you put out on your a la carte. So could you tell us a little bit about that? Like how much reading of other writers' work are you doing? And then also follow up to that, like what are you looking for? What's some of the type of writing that you're really wanting to share?
Yeah. So again, I have a system that takes all of the content from all of the blogs and brings it to me, just all the new material. So there's a technology most blogs have built in that most people don't know about that's called RSS. And I have an RSS reader, so it just goes out to those like 500 sites and just scrapes the new content and gives it to me, so I can just skim through it quickly. And so I can quickly cut out things that don't look interesting or are, life updates or other things I'm not likely to share. Book reviews I don't really share, etc., because I don't think those are of great interest to my readers on the whole. Um, and that just distills it down. And then I just kind of go through those articles looking for ones that stand out to me. The thing I've been doing all these years in my writing and in sharing other information is just assuming that if it's of interest to me, it's probably of interest to somebody else. I don't want to be preachy. I don't want to write things that, I think I've mastered this. Other people need to know this. I write about things that are of interest to me, meaningful to me, and just assume as a pretty normal, relatable person, other people should be able to latch onto that as well. And so, yeah, when I'm looking for things to share, that's essentially what I'm looking for. Is just, does it pass the filter of, yeah, this is of interest to me, and I benefited from it, so I think others will as well. That's pretty subjective, but that's what it is to be human, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just looking. I'm looking for things that are interesting. I also look for things that are beautiful. Just writing that's really, really good. And there's not a ton of that writing that's extraordinary, but there are a few writers out there that I think are especially gifted, and I'm always eager to share their material as well.
That's great. I think Amber dug through your archives and found your article about your system. So thank you
Okay, great.
for that. Um, how speaking of the RSS feed, how does a writer, and I know I have a lot of them on this call and who will listen to this who want to be on your radar as a potential person of
Mhm.
that you would share their work. How do they get on your radar? How do they get in your RSS feed?
Just ask. Just
Just
send me a
ask.
note and say, this is my blog. I look for all the ones I can. I like to read more rather than less. Always glad for suggestions, recommendations. I don't tend to go looking for them, so they have to cross my radar somehow. I'm not going to go into Google and type good Christian blogs or something. That's just going to be just going to turn up all the wrong results. So I have to find them kind of serendipitously, or people just have to reach out to me and say, hey, here's my blog. So happy to hear it. I just ask that you don't ask me to read your site until you've written 20 or 30 articles and kind of shown that you're going to stick with it.
Mm,
Because so many people, they write one or two articles and they want to be discovered, and they're not really committed to the craft. And then pretty quickly, because they haven't changed the world after two or three articles, they sputter out and give up, which is fine. But I just like to have people, kind of test it out and see if they're really committed to writing in this short form. And then, yeah, let me know.
yeah, that's so gracious of you. I know there's other writers, I can see their faces right now, who've also been shared by you, and it is such an encouraging thing for a writer to be recognized that way. And so we thank you for that work, and I love that you have a heart for other writers and want to share your platform. You don't have to do that, and so I think that's really gracious and just one way we can, be a community of Christians together. So, um,
Yeah. Let me speak to that for a second, because there was a time earlier on in my writing career when when I didn't do that, and I didn't do it for reasons that were deliberate but sinful, which is I kind of felt like if I gave people away, gave readers away, they would somehow never come back. Like there's a finite amount of, I don't know what, blog readers or something. And the worst thing I could do is send them to someone else. It would be like a church saying, don't go to our church, go to another church, or a business saying, yeah, go buy your clothes next door instead of here. I was convicted at one point, though, that God wanted me to be generous. He'd given me this platform, and I just became convicted that God wanted me to share it. And so I did that, and then had the, I guess, unexpected benefit of that actually increasing my platform because a lot of people were interested. They're interested more in my content curation than my content creation. And so that's absolutely fine. I'm not offended by that, that they'd rather read other people's articles than my own. But either way, it worked out well in that pragmatic sense, and it still got people to come to the site. And so, yeah, I was just thankful that I think God convicted me of sin, but then used it in helpful ways.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think it is such a it feels like the fingerprint of God to say, no, don't be afraid to give away what you cannot keep, right? And
Hmm.
so I think that's a sweet lesson.
Yeah.
So when you think about, and you've mentioned it a few times, you said that the way that your platform has been built is not really um, something that we can replicate. I think we've all talked about on this podcast before about just kind of people always say that blogging is dead and that kind of thing. Obviously, it's not. I think it's still alive and well, but it's different than when you got your real meteoric success, if you want to call it that. So, what would you say to writers? Do you believe that it's still a worthy endeavor to blog, even if it's not like full of all of the potential that you kind of experienced? Or would you say it is full of that potential, maybe in a different way?
I think there's still potential there. I mean, you have to define what a blog is because I'd say Substack is basically the same thing. It's just, today's WordPress or something. It's just the in platform, but the writing is essentially the same. It has monetization built in and emailing built in, but it's pretty much the same thing, short form writing people can subscribe to or sign up for. So yeah, I think there's Substack has taken off, which shows there's still this desire for people to read others, read their reflections, opinions, whatever it is, and to do so outside of the normal gatekeepers. And that's what blogging offered to the human experience. Is prior to blogging, if you wanted to be a writer, you had to go through the gatekeepers, which were the editors at magazines or the editors at publishing houses. That was really the only way to have a voice. Um, there were some exceptions. You remember Josh Harris starting his New Attitude magazine or whatever in the homeschool crowd and kind of growing a platform that way. But that was very difficult and very rare. Um, Blogging allowed anyone to start a website and have a voice apart from all the gatekeepers. That's not going away. It hasn't gone away, and I don't see it going away anytime soon. So, the options then are you basically start a blog, or you go to Substack, or you do short form through Instagram or Twitter or some of the more standard social media platforms. But yeah, there's still a deep desire for people to read others. Um, so yeah, I don't see that going anywhere. So the path is a little different now because publishers are looking out for different things now. They want you to have a platform of a certain extent, and that's more difficult to do. There's just more noise out there. When I started, there were maybe a couple hundred Christian blogs, and there was no social media whatsoever. And so I was a pretty loud voice in a pretty small crowd, if you will. Now, of course, it's a massive crowd with so much noise. It's harder and harder to kind of get filtered out. So, um, yeah, but I still think there's a pathway there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so encouraging for us as writers to think there is a pathway. It just looks a little different, and you kind of have to find out what that looks like for you.
Yeah.
Um,
Can I just say this?
sure.
This is something I brought up at the conference last week, is I think what people are tempted to do now is they want to have a book contract. And that can be a good desire, that can be a really idolatrous desire, it's between you and the Lord to work out. Um, the question is, how are you going to get there, or what are you going to leverage in order to get there? So what people are told is you need to go on social media, you need to start a blog or whatever. They're not bringing the best of what they've got to that because they're not really interested in it. They're just using that in order to get the thing they really want, which is a book contract. So I'd say if you're going to do anything at all, do it to the best of your ability and do it for the right motives. So just try and do your absolute best to love and serve other people through that blog or through whatever platform you choose to kind of grow an audience. So don't just use people so you can feel the validation of having a book contract. Love people and serve people. And even if you don't get the book contract, at least you will have done your duty before the Lord. And I think the Lord will be pleased and will reward that, perhaps not with a contract, but just in some way or the other. So I just want to be careful that we're not just kind of leveraging people or using things in order to get what we actually desire.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think too that there's so many channels in which to leverage that aligns with who you are, right? Like if you're not someone who's real comfortable in front of a camera or being on social media, there are other ways that you can serve others and be more consistent with the way God made you. Your strengths and versus your weaknesses, and highlight those versus um yeah, like you said, using other people kind of as a stepping stone to get where you want to be. You can find a path that feels authentic,
Mhm.
I think. At least with all of the variations of Substack and WordPress and social media, there are a lot of ways to serve and love people well.
Yep. Yeah, and of course, podcasting and
And
video,
podcasts. Yeah.
they're all essentially accomplishing the same thing in that regard. On some level, you need to show statistics, and that's what I think we dislike about the publishing industry is if you're a terrible writer who's very popular, you're far more likely to get a book contract than if you're an extraordinary writer with no following, right? That's the horrible dollars and cents of the
Yeah.
industry. It used to be that when you became a writer, they would help you find an audience, but now they want you to bring an audience to them. That's an inversion of the way it used to work.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Well, you said that you would love to just be a full-time writer if you could make that choice. But what would that look like for you in terms of like what you seem to have kind of a lot of interests in different areas of Christian living. Are there particular ones that you would like to explore more, and what would those be?
I think if I look back at my books, um, many of which are behind me, it kind of reflects my mind, which is a little bit all over the place. I've written about a bunch of different things. There's no big picture, no rhyme or reason to it. Years ago, when I was starting to write, Randy Alcorn, I spoke to him just the one time I've ever spoken to him, and he told me only ever agree to write a book you're passionate about in the moment. So never say, I'm going to write. I'll sign a contract to write this book 2 years from now on this topic. Just find something you're passionate about, write about it now, and don't agree to do something in the future. And I think that advice has been helpful because my interests do vary a lot over time, and I would hate to be kind of stuck writing a book I no longer felt passion for. So if anything was available to me right now, I honestly don't know what I'd write. There's nothing I'm particularly passionate about in the moment that I would want to write a full book about. I do have my publisher does I do owe them a book, and like I said, I'm getting near the end. I've gone through the self-loathing phase. I'm now near the end of the procrastinating phase.
Yes. Yeah.
And that means I got to come up with it soon. And I think they want me to write a book on family, marriage and family, something along those lines. But that's very broad, and I got to find some way of narrowing it down to something that's actually a book. So that may be my next thing.
The next thing. I I think it's funny, your self-loathing and procrastination phase. I think that's so relatable because we do that to ourselves, don't we? So
We do.
that's funny. Well, I want to give everyone an opportunity to chime in, ask questions.
Mhm.
Um, you want to unmute and show your face if you'd like, that would be great. Maybe while you're thinking about that, if you have any questions, um, tell us a little bit more about your work in the ministry, and are you? I think I read in your very illustrious bio that you're an elder at the church. How
Mhm.
much preaching do you do, and how much does that impact and influence your writing? And are you kind of using those things to like repurpose content for both preaching and blogging?
Yeah, that's a good question. That last one. Remind me to come back to that if I forget. I'm an elder at the church. I was on staff for the church for a time. Rotated off quite a while, maybe 8 or more years ago now. I was associate pastor. Um, I kind of came to the point where I just couldn't keep doing both, and along with my fellow elders, asked that question of what of these two things, writing and pastoral ministry, which does the Lord seem to be unusually blessing, if either of them? And as we looked at it, we saw there's a young guy who was really eager to be the next associate pastor. Meanwhile, it seemed like of all the people who had tried writing and developing a career out of it, I was one of the few who was in that position where I could do it vocationally. And so we just sort of took that as, okay, then we'll do writing full time and I'll stay on as an elder. Um, so I've been an elder at that church for, I don't know, what, 15 years or something now. I don't have a, real job, which means I can do a little bit more than I otherwise would. So I chair the elders, I lead a lot of our meetings. I'm often up front on Sunday. I preach fairly frequently. Um, More recently, there's again some young guys who need to get their first reps in, so that kind of bumps me down in the preaching order a little. But I think I just saw him preaching every 2 weeks all through the summer, giving other people vacation time.
Mm.
Um, in terms of repurposing content, I have found, so one observation, Monday mornings, there's a lot of men who share 3 point blog articles, three alliterated point blog articles, and they're usually not very good. Um, Sermons are one form of communication, blogs/books are another form of communication. And so generally, I don't think sermons make very compelling blog content. However, I do think there's a way of extracting points or illustrations or something from a sermon and turning it into a good article. So I want to be careful. I never write a sermon that I actually want to be an article. I want to preach to the people of my church and preach purely to them. That's very important to me. But I do think afterwards I can sometimes say, yeah, I think I could draw this out and make it could be the basis of a good article. I don't think I've ever read a book that was comprised primarily of sermons that was very good either. Okay, so fine, like some people can just print their sermons and that can be okay. But usually when you switch the medium, it doesn't work very well. And
Yeah.
so I think you find the same is true of speeches or conference talks or anything else. It's hard to make them good blog content.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the way they're delivered, and I would assume it would require just a massive reworking to
Yeah.
make it digestible in that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, it's often so much reworking, it's just not worth doing for
Right.
the small benefit you get out of it.
Well, and I'll get to your question in just a second, Carrie, but it made me think as you were talking about Chat GPT. I mean, that's just kind of a hot topic among writers, like how much is okay to use, how much is not okay to use, like where, and I think probably there's a line that varies from writer to writer, but what's your take on AI help, and do you have like principles that you can offer other writers who might be like trying to figure out like what's the right balance?
Yeah, I don't really use it yet. I've dabbled here and there just to kind of test some of its capabilities. As elders at our church, we sort of agreed that any use we make of it, we'll tell the others about, just to um, sort of explore together what it can be useful for. So here's a use for it. I was working on a sermon earlier and I came up with 3 words that all began with TR, to to structure my sermon, classic Baptist alliteration.
Right.
And I just thought, well, I'm going to ask ChatGPT for other words that begin with TR that might be useful. Now, and it worked pretty well. It was fine. That's really to me no different than consulting a dictionary or thesaurus or something else. I don't see that as an advanced function of AI. There's lots of ways you could find words that begin with TR, but that's about as far as I've used it for work purposes. I use Grammarly to check all my content before I post it. Grammarly was around for a long time and did the exact same things they do today, but now they call it AI. Before it was just spell check or something. So I think there's a lot of that. And people are saying it's AI when it's actually not. It's just good, clever programming. So I'm all about that. I'm amazed how many typos I can make. I'm a pretty good writer, pretty good proofreader, and still always miss stuff. So I'm thankful for tools like that. But yeah, I'm not ready to go down the Chat GPT hole yet. I'm too concerned about it and would never use it to generate content or anything. I think it will create some very mediocre articles. Already, it's pretty easy to tell, I think, when somebody has used it to generate content that they've then shared with the world.
Yeah. Yeah. It does feel like a weighty a weighty consideration for writers to kind of contend
Hmm.
with, like, because I use Grammarly too. I don't think of that as AI because
Yeah.
it's those commas and semicolons and things like that. But when you're asking it to think for you, to do some of the heavy lifting, yeah, that it feels slippery.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I know even in our community there's just a spectrum of of conviction maybe on how it can be used. So that's
Yeah.
interesting
And
to hear your take
I
that
mean,
you're completely
yeah.
free of it, sounds like.
Yeah, for the time being. But I'll write a book and send it to an editor, and the editor might make very substantial changes to it. And I can go through and just click yes, yes, yes. And that's well within the bounds of what it means to be a writer. Like we all assume the works have been edited, which means that not every word is actually mine. An editor might have reworked a whole sentence or added a sentence. That's the job of an editor. So in that way, some of what ChatGPT does isn't necessarily wrong or immoral or outside of the bounds. But I think we need to be careful there and make sure our use of it is thoughtful and um, let all things be done in the light, not in the dark, right? I think if we're ashamed of what we've done or we're trying to hide it, I would be pretty concerned about that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good distinction for sure. Carrie asked, she's asking about posting on two different places, website and on Substack, the same content. Do you think that's a good practice, or do you feel like writers should stick to one platform? Um, why or why not?
I would not duplicate content because that's frowned upon by search engines, etc. And what they tend to do, I believe, is just take both copies out of their indexes. So yeah, really, you're not supposed to duplicate content. People do it, and maybe it's harmless, but yeah, I would pick one and go with it. If I was starting over today, brand new, tallies.com, I register the name, I want to send information to the world. I think I would probably go with Substack because it's where the energy is right now. Now, a funny thing happened along the way. Blogs used blogs arose at a time when people no longer wanted stuff sent to their email. And so the whole idea was give me a way of accessing content, but don't flood my inbox. But somewhere in there, things changed, and people now do want content in their inbox again. And that's where Substack was ahead of the trend. They were sending everything to people's emails. It's hard to access it in other ways. I don't know how many people read entirely through the Substack app, but I guess almost everybody has it emailed to them. And so they have that function built in very well. The other function they have built in is monetization, and they have a good monetization capability there, which is something blogs didn't do very well. So yeah, I think I would. I'm not advising you start there. I'm just saying I think that's where I would begin if I were to start over today. Um, if I have a concern about Substack, it's the kind of we own your content factor. You're posting it in their world, they own it, you can extract it, but it's kind of hard to go from Substack to other things. I'm glad that I'm in WordPress. I'm on my own site. It's hosted in my own database. Um, the content is mine to do with whatever I want. Nobody can take it away from me.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that too. And then the downside of WordPress and those kind of other platforms is there's an expense and a time involved with that
Yeah.
I think the Substack platform provides pretty user friendly for writers just starting
Yeah.
out. So
Yeah. There's much deeper customization you can do with WordPress, etc., than with Substack. So there's pluses and minuses both ways.
yeah. Yeah, and Sarah mentioned that within Substack, you at least you do own your contacts. Your emails are yours, right? And
Mhm.
I think the content is legally yours too. But just looking ahead, we don't always know exactly how things will play out and what will happen with that content in the future. So there is a little bit of a relinquishing of control when
Mhm.
we're borrowing somebody's platform. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. Um, I'm curious too, just with all the things that you've mentioned you're doing, are you kind of doing it all on your own? Are you a la carte yourself? Do you have a team of people behind you that are helping you do all this, or is this part of your real, not real job?
I do a la carte 100% by myself. I write articles 100% by myself. Post the content. That's all me. I do have a few assistants, all kind of part-time homemakers who work for me, um, people in the church. So one is maybe my wife's closest friend. She works maybe 10 to 15 hours a week for me. She does interacts with sponsors. If there's a sponsored post that goes up, she's created that. She does bookkeeping type stuff. So some of the more business functions. She's been working for me forever. Um, my daughter does some stuff, social media stuff, Kindle deal stuff. Just hired her to do that recently. And then I have an artist who creates the daily graphics. She does, yeah, just that. And then sometimes when I need other artwork done, she does that for me, but very part-time. And then there's one more, another mom in the church who does she helps find the quotes I use and just does some sort of background kind of stuff. She'll create the template for a la carte. So every weekend she'll create 6 a la cartes, kind of drop the graphics in there, all of that, and then get it prepared. So when I find the content, I can drop it all in there. So
Hmm.
kind of how we've apportioned it out over the years.
Yeah. Well, it
Yeah.
becomes a little cottage industry in a way. You've got a
Yeah.
lot of it. It does require so many hands to make it look so good and
Yeah.
reach so many people. Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the principles there is I wanted to, as much as possible, and as I was able financially, to get rid of any tasks that I didn't enjoy or that I found especially difficult so I could focus as much of my energy as possible on the task of creating content. I think that's where my best value is. So bookkeeping, I hate it. I don't understand it. I don't understand money. I don't know any. I hate it all. Don't want anything to do with it. So I could turn that over to somebody who's fine with it and gladly pay her to take care of it so I don't have to think about it. And some of the repetitive tasks like setting up the a la cartes, I'm very capable of doing that. But why not? If I can use that same time to do something where I bring unique value, why not? Why not do that? So just thankfully, as the site's grown, sponsors have come on board, et cetera, I've been able to do that, pay people to do that for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. I love that. I agree. There are just a lot of tasks we're all capable of doing, but if it can free up some time, why not get some help and use other people's skills? So that's good to know.
Yeah.
It's good to know. Sometimes we see things and we see a platform, we're like, wow, how do they do it all? Well, they usually have a little bit of help. And
Mhm.
so that's good.
Yeah. But one thing I don't ever want to get into is having somebody write in my name or for me, because that happens a lot in the Christian world, even in the, kind of my segment of the Christian world. That can happen a fair bit where
Mm.
some people create the amount of content you realize they can never do that on their own. So it's under their name, but it's not them. And I don't think that's necessarily immoral or anything, but I want to stop before there. Not that people are clamoring for it, but I just want to me, that would be the cutoff point. If it's If I can't create it, I'm not interested in it.
Yeah. That's a good line to draw in the sand for sure. Well, if there's any other questions, feel free to put them in. But I'm also wondering too, maybe just as we close, Tim, if you could, how would you think about or define success at this stage in the game for you? Maybe for you personally, how do you define it? How would you encourage other Christian writers to look at that idea of success? I think we often have a vision of what that looks like in our minds, and sometimes it doesn't always align with the Lord's vision of success. So, what would you say to that?
So, success in writing, whether that's online writing or book writing, usually is easily quantified, right? It's numbers. I'll feel successful if a certain number of people are reading my stuff or a certain number of books have sold, etc. And to me, that would kill me if I regarded success in that way. I don't really keep track of numbers. I don't really know how many people read the blog. At least I don't focus on that. I mean, I couldn't answer the question really if somebody asked me. I've never learned how to read my royalty statement, so I don't know how many of my books are selling, etc. But partly that's a decision. I just don't want to do everything by the numbers. If publishers say, like I had a publisher get in touch and say, "Yeah, we're taking your book out of print." I know how to read that. That means nobody's buying it, and that's fine. I'll leave that to the numbers people. For me, success is being dutiful, just carrying out the duty God has assigned to me, and that duty is to glorify Him by loving others. And so I just want the blog, the books, all of it to be an expression of love for others. If I can be faithful in the opportunities God gives me to love others, I think I'll consider that successful, and I trust the Lord will as well. And if the numbers decline, um, then so maybe I can't get sponsors the way I used to or something, or maybe this whole thing declines and goes away. I wouldn't consider that a lack of success. I don't need this. This doesn't give me life in a sense. This isn't my idol. There's other things I can do with my life if the writing thing falls through. And so I don't think I'm clinging to it with such tenacity that it would kill me to let it go. I just want to be faithful to what God has given me. For now, I think this is it. If he redirects me in the future, I trust, take that gladly and do that for his glory as well.
That's really good. I think the numbers. I love your your honesty about not being into the numbers, and I think that that is such an easy way to define our work and our worth, and it's very challenging. I think sometimes not to check how many people are on my website at any
Yeah.
given moment. I think that it can be such a slippery slope, and it can take
Yeah.
us away from the real work of loving others and loving the Lord and just offering words as a means to do that.
Yeah, and when we focus on numbers, there's no number that will ever satisfy our hearts, right? That's the thing. We think if only I had this many people, I get 1,000 people a day who read my site, I'll be content. But then you'll notice that somebody else's site gets 1,001 readers, and you'll be undone, and
Yeah.
you'll be jealous again, you'll be discontent, you'll grumble. And so it's a never-ending battle. Nobody wants to be yeah, you can't win that game. And so numbers can be meaningful, but far better to focus on other metrics, metrics of obedience, metrics of maximizing the opportunities God gives, and trust the numbers to Him. I don't think someday I can take a count of all the articles people have read or all the page views to the Lord and say, "Look, I was faithful." I don't think that's how He's going to count success in the
Yeah.
great day.
Yeah. That's a good word. Cheryl, I think was at your conference last week and
She
asked
was, yeah.
about you spoke about the writing from the peaks and valleys of life, but also reminded them not to commoditize their life events to write about. How do you find that balance?
Yeah, it's hard. And I think mostly we have to check ourselves for that. Um, if we are if we are doing things for good motives or poor motives. I've been thinking recently about the kind of funeral where people air their grievances with their parents, and I think that's sort of become catchier, the obituaries where people air their grievances with their parents. And thinking, are you really doing that to serve other people? Is that really helpful, or is that just you, yeah, sort of airing dirty laundry? There's, you know, you can use your parents. You're not honoring them. You're not helping other people. What you're really doing is kind of building your own profile through your parents' sin or something. I think we just need to be careful that we're not leveraging other people and not necessarily leveraging every experience in life in order to essentially help ourselves. Writing too transparently about the people in our lives, writing too transparently about strangers we may encounter, etc. I don't know that that's loving people very well. And so, look, there's a time to write about family. There's a time to write about friends. There's a time to do all that. But I think just being very careful that we're not using people, that we're truly, whatever we write is truly an expression of love first for them, consistent with love for them, and then also loving other people. We're well into the first generation of kids who are raised as a product of their parents' media empire. And I mean, just read some of the books by the Duggars or something, right? And you'll see what it means to have your parents leveraging you for the sake of their own enrichment or the sake of their own fame. And that's been repeated on a much less successful or grand scale a million times over. And trust me, your children will know if you're loving them or using them, if you're really honoring them, or if you're using them to build your own platform and build your own fame. So I think we need to be very cautious with that.
Yeah. And I guess when you talk about commoditize, you're not you're not speaking of the ways in which like we're the lens of life where you're like, oh, that would be a good story. That would be something to write about on my blog. You're saying it more as a stepping stone of using other people in order to prop yourself up. Is that correct?
Yeah, that, and I do think if we're talking about other people, we need to make sure we're doing so in a way that protects their dignity, protects their confidentiality, and again, really loves them. So, it's like the pastor who uses illustrations about his children, and sometimes you think, boy, that was not very kind to embarrass your wife or embarrass your child like that. How much at least clear it with them before you use them. Um, but yeah, just being careful with the information we put out there. That stuff is out there forever, and really can be harmful or embarrassing for
Yeah.
those who are mentioned in it. So I just urge a lot of caution with that. That's
Yeah.
true when writing about them. It's possibly even more true when it comes to some of the more visual media out there.
Right. Things live on well past our awareness of them
Exactly.
online. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Well, Tim, thank you so much for your time, for meeting us here, and just being a constant presence of Christian love out there in the world, and for your love and encouragement of writers. We're all beneficiaries of that. So we appreciate your time and coming here to talk to us today.
Well, good. You're very welcome. And if anyone out there has a site I'm not aware of, then just send it to me. It's just my email is tim@challies.com, as easy as can be.
Awesome. And you can follow Tim and sign up for his emails there as well at challies.com. So, and also I know you're on Instagram and Facebook. Anywhere else you want to be found, Tim?
Yeah, it's
So-
Challies is a unique last name, so probably if you go somewhere and just do /Challies, you'll find my stuff there.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, once again, thank you, and I hope you guys
Thank
have a
you.
great day. Thanks, Tim.
All right.
Bye-bye.